Designer babies. Designer babies are already available in India. I'm sure you know that in Maharashtra, Amul, the world's maximum number of surrogate mothers takes place in a small area of 1 square kilometer. 600 surrogate mothers. Today, this morning, I read in the newspaper that the father is also the grandfather of his child. The whole world is becoming topsy-turvy. So and the brain is going to contribute to it. A 7 Tesla MRI. Recently, an application has been made to the Department of Science and Technology for funding for a 7 Tesla MRI. James Osman, the editor of Surgical Neurology, is trying out a 15 Tesla MRI in the United States. A stage is going to come where we will be able to see even more than what you see under the microscope or what you see in an anatomy department. But the problem is we don't know what this represents. I have no idea today what is the normal blood sugar in a 95-year-old. And I'm so sad when I see doctors prescribing medicines just because a 90-year-old's blood sugar was 180. Perhaps 180 is a normal blood sugar for a 90-year-old. Why should you reduce the blood pressure in an 85-year-old because it is above 120/80? So we have no idea what is even normal values, and the same thing with the structure of the brain. This, I think, is a fantastic slide. A brain wave is worth 1,000 words. All these years, I was taught that electrical activity takes place in the brain. I mean, any good 12th standard student should know that every nerve cell generates electrical activity. But do you know that the electrical activity which is generated, reverse engineering can be done, and based on that electrical activity, I can tell you what you spoke. I can tell you what you thought. I can convert it to the English language, and here you see each word generated as a unique pattern in the brain. When I say brain, a certain type of electrical activity is generated. Today we have the technology to identify that. Therefore, reverse engineering, when I play that I do this for 10,000 people, and 9,985 of them have the same alpha, beta, gamma, delta activity when the word brain is said. So when I have this activity, that means he said the word brain. Extrapolate this. Just look at what is going to happen to the world. Where is privacy? I mean, even my thought processes can be dissected, threadbare, through electrical activity, and all this can be worked out. Experiment. All these are done. These are science. This is not a figment of my imagination. All that I have done in the last 30-40 minutes is to collate the information which is available today in the literature and try to put it in a logical sequential analysis, an acoustic waveform. We are now talking of reconstructing speech from the auditory cortex. So long we were talking about which part of the brain does what happens when this particular function is done in the form of electrical activity, in the form of magnetic activity, in the form of regional cerebral blood flow, and so on and so forth. Now we are reversing the process, and we are saying that you can reconstruct speech from the auditory cortex. This is too complicated for me to go into the details. Of course, this must be taken in good humor, but then you can see the differences between the male brain and the female brain. Somebody has said that this part of the female brain is responsible for shoes. And we know several women in India and outside the world who have got 600 pairs of shoes and 800 pairs of shoes and so on. So this is what you can see. Bizarre moods area, shopping lobe. I mean, I may be accused of being a sexist and gender discrimination. Of course, this is meant in good humor, but you can see this is what is happening. Oh my, what do we have here? It's a patient's train of thought. Let me take it out. Every year or so, you can see it's pulled the same. Brain surgery, I have an app for that. 20 years from now, you will go under a neurosurgeon's knife, and on his tablet, he will type the appropriate buttons. He'll get an app for doing this particular procedure. Do you want to be treated by a surgeon like that, who depends on an app? Well, maybe in the future, this is what is going to happen. I foresee that in the next 15 years, a functional neurosurgeon's office, when the receptionist says, "What can we do for you?" he says, "I want this song to be removed from my head." I don't think this is just flippancy. I don't think this is just a cartoon. It could happen. May not be a song, but maybe something else. And here you can see, already we are doing deep brain stimulation as a routine process. Just like Bombay Hospital, they run more than 500. In Chennai, about 20, 30 have been done. I would guess at least 1,000 such patients have undergone these procedures for Parkinsonism, for different types of movement disorders, etc., etc. And based on these deep brain stimulation studies, which are now routinely being done, an enormous amount of clinical data is being obtained. How the brain reveals why we buy. I was already mentioned to you about neuromarketing. Papers have been published here. You can see here how brain science is changing our world. Neuromarketing. It's an outlandish word that scrapes across the tongue, leaving an aftertaste of thought. The buy button. Everything today can be broken down to its constituents. But is this really required? Would you like M.S. Subbulakshmi's song to be broken down, critically analyzed, anatomically dissected not just with a knife, dissected with engineering, and say M.S. Subbulakshmi or Michael Jackson or whatever it is, Abdul Rahman, whatever it is, they are nothing but a product of the way in which their brain has been wired. They are nothing but the way in which neurotransmitters in the brain are going through. The difference between a donkey like me who brays and a fantastic singer is purely because a difference of neurotransmitters, a difference in way anatomy and physiology is done. Would you like Shakespeare's superb literature to be reduced to this? Do you all want to be equated to this? Or do you still want some amount of mysticism, some amount of we don't know? That is what adds to the value of life, and that is what happens. But are we going away? Can Brain Scans company help some more? Harvard Business Review. Huge courses are being done on this. I'm not going into the details for lack of time. Now, will brain-machine interface? 20 years from now, it may not be possible for you to distinguish between a robot and between a human being. 5 days ago, there was a news item. I mean, no doubt it's a journalist's figment of imagination, but it said that a robot committed suicide. The first robot in the world to commit suicide. And there were explanations for it. Today in Tokyo or in the Europe, I think even in India, they've started making the advertise for robots which will clean your glasses, windows, and which will do sweeping of the floor, etc. A human element has been introduced into robots in Japan purely because most centenarians of the world live in Japan. 15% of the population of Japan is already above the age of 70. And you have got millions of people who are above the age of 90 who are all alone, nobody to look after them. And therefore robots have been introduced with an emotional component. Technically it's possible. Any good robotics engineer can do that. A robot committing suicide. This is the future. It's going to be difficult to differentiate between a cyborg. There was a neurophysiologist in England who was the world's first cyborg. He had a chip implanted into his elbow so that the moment he enters his room, the lights will be on. You don't even have voice activation will become passé in 5 years from now. Today all of us are familiar with voice activation. Every software program has this. In the future, you will not have a mouse, you will not have a keyboard, you will just look at it. There will be a PowerPoint icon here, an Excel sheet icon, something. When I wanted to open this PPT, I look at it. And when I look at it, this eye converges here, this eye converges here. With elementary biophysics, it's possible to plot the precise point where the two medial rectus, lateral rectus, muscle, etc. are converging. I know I'm converging there, and therefore the PowerPoint will open. All these research studies are already being carried out. Brain-computer interface makes new tasks as simple as waving a hand. Small electrodes placed on the brain, not only inside the brain, but on the surface of the scalp, will allow patients to interact with computers or control robotic limbs purely by thinking. We have two PhD scholars in Guindy, few miles from here, at the Anna University. I am a co-guide for one of them, and this work has been going on for the last 3 years, where today you are able to will a particular action purely by thought processes. These are not fiction. I now come into a next area called neuroprosthetics. The Jaipur foot, everybody thought it was a fantastic object. All of us thought these mechanical devices are superb. We thought electronic devices are out of the world. But today, what is happening is a marriage between electronic, carpentry, wooden processes and the God-given central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord. Today, replacement and augmentation of damaged senses, it improves the quality of life, and as you will see, you are actually able to do this. I remember, let's say, the blind will see, the deaf will hear, the lame will walk. This looks more like a Sunday morning sermon given on the pulpit by somebody. He says, go to St. Luke's, go to Velangani, go to Tirupati, go somewhere, etc. But ladies and gentlemen, this is going to happen. The blind will be able to see, the deaf will be able to hear, the lame will be able to walk. Unfortunately, it's very, very expensive now. It's a question of time before the prices come down, and today we have visual prosthesis. Google has already started marketing Google goggles. Today you can wear it. The camera is inside and it's available for sale, $2,000. So what I'm talking about is not science fiction. Again, these are all practical examples. This guy here climbed 131 stories. I don't think anybody in this room who apparently are normal will be able to climb 131 stories. He did it taught with 2 artificial limbs controlled by his spinal cord. Just look at this guy. He is able to do most of the functions possible. And who is doing it? His brain. His brain is telling him to abduct, to adduct, to flex, to extend, to do all the complicated functioning of the hand, which is being able to done, the signals are able to transmit. This is the ultimate. These are all very recent. You can see here September 2013. This is just 4 weeks old. You can see here one man controls another's hand motions in the world's first human brain-to-brain interface. I sit here. My electrical activity of my brain is recorded. There's another guy sitting at the other end of the table. His electrical activity of the brain is recorded. I am able to will him to move an object on his screen. If you think I'm bluffing, details are given here. I'll be happy to share with anybody whatever information they want. Homo sapiens is going to be replaced by Robo sapiens or Homo mobilicus. Charles Darwin said that it will take tens of thousands of years for a new species to evolve. I had the privilege of meeting Marty Cooper about 3 years ago. Marty Cooper, for some of you may not know, invented the world's first mobile phone. In the last 40 years, we have got a new species called Homo mobilicus or Homo digitalicus, which is totally different from Homo sapiens. Similarly, we are going to have a new species called Homo robo sapiens or whatever you want. Just look at this. A Chinese surgeon grows a replacement of the nose on a man's forehead. I'm scared to teach my grandchildren now. I would have taught my grandchildren that this is for smelling, this is for this thing, this is for hearing, and this is for seeing. I'm scared to teach them that now. 10 years from now, as you will see here, the ear can be used for seeing. The nose can be used for functions which God in His wisdom never designed. I hope technology will not let me down, but for you to see actually what happens, just look at this. It's not technology, it's a man behind the machine that counts.
It's conserved across the mammalian line and probably even further back. You can see that it's subcortical here, so this is a brain issue. So we can use it actually to predict financial choice, but beyond that, we can actually use it to index some symptom profiles in mental disorders. And
the position. With fully proportional speed control, the user can master delicate tasks such as holding an egg. Folding links allow the fingers to flex for natural function and appearance. The B-Bionic hand offers up to 14 grip patterns for versatility and unrivaled performance. In a partially closed power grip, the hook grip is achieved. This is ideal for carrying a shopping bag or briefcase. In precision open grip, the middle, ring and little fingers stay open.
Please remember, it is the human brain which is controlling this electronic apparatus.
For inputting a PIN number, pressing a button, or typing on a keyboard.
For nearly a month, 27-year-old Pierpaolo Petruzzello was the bionic man science fiction writers have long envisioned. Using only his or passing several tests, the Brazilian Petruziello was enrolled in the Life Hand Project. 4 miniature electrodes were surgically implanted in what remained of his left arm. These electrodes helped him recognize and control the biomechanical hand.
Basically, we sent him various stimuli. He had to learn how to localize them in his lost hand and fingers.
He has no hand.
The prosthetic itself was not implanted, only connected through electrodes.
My arm with needles, I closed my eyes and tried to think that my hand did exist. You don't have your hand. You don't have your forearm, so how can you control the hand movements?
How can a brain
It's difficult
control
to
a hand which
explain.
does not
I closed
exist?
my eyes and repeated to myself, your hand does exist. It's there, it's in place. At a mental level, it's very stressing. I needed to concentrate. I needed silence. Then I said to myself, you can wiggle the fingers, you can pinch, you can clench a fist, you can open your hand, you can just do that.
Though similar experiments have previously been performed, project researchers said this was the first time a patient has been able to make such complex movements in a biomechanical hand using only his mind. The $3 million project was funded by the European Union and took 5 years to complete. The next challenge, connecting a patient's nervous system and prosthetic limb for years, not just...
That evening, it felt like my legs were dragging behind me. Same thing happened a week later. Then that started happening more and more frequently. His tests, and 3 or 4 months later, pronounced that I had spinal cerebellar degeneration.
See, the spinal cerebellar degeneration has no treatment at all.
Move to a place in space, orient a wrist, and then have a variety of different grasps with her hand so that she could pick up different objects like a Coke bottle or a set of keys or a fork.
I can't wait to do this, to be part of the medical science, to push the technology onward, and for the fun for me, because I haven't been able to move my arm for 10 years. So just being able to...
And so in this case, we implanted 2. These are implanted along the motor strip, and really tried to target this so that we would place one centered in the areas that were activated when she was imagining using her hand. And then curious to find out whether or not we could record anything that sounded like a neuron.
I'm moving things. I have not moved things for about 10 years.
All right.
There we go.
Very fast. That kind of thing. And so, since she was making good progress with that, we decided to try to add in orientation of the wrist, so rotating it in all 3 directions, and then also adding in grasp. So that's where we're sort of focusing now on 7 dimensions.
Is imagining moving the arm
She is ordering
exactly where
this
she wants the
machine
arm
to
to
do
go,
these things.
just like you or I would control our own arm.
By her thought
and then
process.
she controlled it perfectly.
Not voice command, not mechanical, not physical.
That was incredible. You made that look like training.
You can see the electrodes on her. You can see here, the electrical activity of her brain is being processed and then fed into this, and this is doing it. This is where science is today. She is in full control of that machine.
Watching her complete tests that we normally have for people with stroke who are trying to recover function, and having this beautiful fluid control of a robotic arm through thought.
She's eating a chocolate.
In those muscles that I hadn't used before.
By a complex sensory system, this bionic leg allows more range of motion and reacts faster to an
Better than the
amputee's
God-given
every
leg,
move.
if at all that's possible.
Because they can never do before.
It's powered by Bluetooth technology that allows amputees
Bluetooth
to switch
technology.
between different activity settings like biking or golfing.
And this
Seattle resident Zach Vaughter
Just look at that. The guy climbs 131 floors.
3 years ago. Vaughter, a Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago participant, will climb 103 floors of the Willis Tower on Sunday at the 4th annual Skyrise event using the first bionic leg, a neural-controlled prosthetic leg driven
signals for leg control. There's also a really advanced hardware.
The computer program on the screen is used to monitor signals coming from
Electromyogram is done by the electrical activity of muscles and nerves are recorded. Just look at the way he's walking.
On a computer, and then teach this small microcomputer what it looks like.
Close to 3,000 individuals will climb the 103 flights of stairs.
And this is how you will order beer in the future.
What's the number one thing on a man's mind? Not that. It's beer. And not just any beer, extra cold beer. What if we could build a machine that delivers just that? A machine that would pour you an extra cold Castle Light at the speed of thought. Introducing the Extra Cold Mind Booth. Designed to reward a man's focus on extra cold refreshment in any hot situation. Yet another innovation in beer technology from those cool cats at Castle Light. By focusing their minds on extra cold, users are able to unlock Castle Light. So more focus equals more beer. By removing all traditional interfaces and replacing the input with the power of the mind, we created a seamless experience between man, mind, and beer, culminating in an automated beer pour in the heat of the moment, a first in beer technology. And with over 100 liters of beer dispensed
Think about beer and the beer
using nothing but the power of a man's mind, we proved that men stay extra cool under pressure and always get what they want, an extra cold Castle Light. So imagine that right now. Castle Light, the ultimate in extra cold refreshment.
No doubt this is an ad, but just to tell you this is the way even the advertisement, neuromarketing, all these things are happening. Direct brain-to-brain communication in humans, a pilot study. You can see this is again just 2 weeks ago at the University of Washington, where one person's brain waves was transferred to another person, and through that the second person was able to carry out, okay, I think for lack of time we'll skip it. Okay, now I'll quickly go through this. I know I'm running short of time. Surgical treatment for hypertension. 16% of urban India are hypertensives. 16% of urban India have diabetes. And you can imagine, when we are about 1,300 neurosurgeons in the country, but then the number of people with brain tumors, the number of people with head injuries, etc., are also not as much. Imagine if a neurosurgeon is going to play a role in the management of, sorry, I don't know how this happened, in the management of diabetes and hypertension. This has slowly started now. This is August 12, 2010. This is the University of Pittsburgh. Peter Janetta is a very well-known neurosurgeon, etc., etc. So brain surgery may help against diabetes. About 200 people have been operated. It's going to take a long time, but the very fact that they've started work on this indicates that it just may happen. Expanding applications of deep brain stimulation, a potential therapeutic role in obesity and drug management. On the one hand, we're talking of bariatric surgery. We're talking of cutting your stomach, of stitching your stomach. But please understand, at the end of the day, every single function of the body is dependent on the brain. It is the brain which tells you to eat more. It is the brain which talks about appetite, satiety, etc., etc. We know exactly which part of the hypothalamus, which nucleus you have, the satiety center, the appetite center, etc. And today we have the technology to stimulate that particular area and so on. And again, FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, have given permission for a few very, very selected departments to start work on this. It will be a long time, but nevertheless it's going to happen. Psychiatry, deep brain stimulation for treatment-resistant depression. I could go on and on like this. And these are all done under local. Obviously, we require the full cooperation of the patient. It's not as bad as it seems here. You can see, I don't know that you will be smiling and happy with all this inside your brain. Now, this is the problem which are going to happen. Stimulating personality. Smoking. Let's take smoking. Is it innocuous? Is it a habit, or should we intervene? Look at the ethical issues. Are you justified in putting an electrode in somebody's brain to prevent him from smoking, to prevent him from drugs, to prevent him from consuming too much of alcohol? So these are the things which are happening now. I honestly don't know the answer. Driverless cars. My son works in Google, and I understand that today there are many driverless cars going about in Mountain View, in San Jose, and the governments have permitted driverless cars to go. But what is going to happen is in Australia, you can see a car driven by attention. Some of us would have had the experience when we were driving, we feel a little sleepy or something like that. Today it is possible, the brain waves can be extracted to such an extent that when your attention drops down just a little, the car will automatically stop. That is the level to which we are going, where even driving can be done by this. A human head transplant. This was published in Surgical Neurology, one of the top neurosurgical journals of the world. Now this is what I meant. Ears to turn, eyes for the visionless. A new device has developed that can train the brain to convert sounds into images. But then I'm talking of 2030. 25 years ago, we would never have dreamt there would be conferences like this. So I am optimistic enough to think that 20 years from now, it will go. False memory. There's no end to your limit, to your imagination. Every one of these things can happen. False memory implanted in the brain. Experts trick mind into recalling things that never happened. If this can be done in the mind,